What's up, everybody? It's Rixo. This is going to be episode one of What's Real with Rixo. And today we're going to be talking about the coronavirus or COVID-19, whatever you want to refer to. This is day 8 of my sort of self-quarantine situation. And I just want to share my thoughts. How worried should you be? Where did it come from? And things like that. What better time to tap into something that you have been thinking about working on? Everyone's online, so you should probably put that material out there if you were thinking about working on something. But so the making of this video is Wednesday, March 25th, and there are now 458,000 cases worldwide and a little north of 62,000 cases of coronavirus that have been diagnosed in the U.S. I do realize by the time that you watch this, the number will have changed. But first, I do want to share my story. For those of you who don't know, I have been living in New York City for about 2 years now, and I work in Midtown Manhattan. And if you've been paying attention, New York has become the epicenter of this pandemic in the U.S., and particularly New York City has become the epicenter of this pandemic in the United States. But I was actually talking about this the day Kobe Bryant died, and I know the world kind of stopped for a couple of days when he passed. But January 26th is what I remember. I was telling my sister about Kobe, and I was like, also, there's some more bad news. There's this virus in China going on that we should probably pay attention to. So let's get into it. 3 days before Kobe died, actually, on January 23rd, China announced that they would be building a 1,000-bed hospital in just 10 days. Now, I've never seen anything like that before. Never. So that's when I started to pay attention. Now, toward my last week of me being in New York, I left on the 17th of March, and schools were closing slowly but surely across the country. You know, trains were starting to be a little bit more empty. This is like March 10th, 11th, 12th, around that time. And even a little bit before then, you could sort of see the city kind of slowed down. And I mean, when you were on the train, you know, that stare that you might have with somebody lasted like a half a second longer because, you know, it was lingering in the back of everybody's mind. But once they closed down my job, they closed it down, I think, Tuesday, March 17th. And that's when I knew I had to leave. I knew I had to get out of New York City because that is the absolute worst place to be in something like this. But first off, I do want to give you guys some background information on COVID-19 or coronavirus. COVID-19 simply just means coronavirus disease 2019. Call it whichever one, it means the same thing. But actually, it's been taking the world by storm for actually a couple of months now. But I want to start by saying, what is a coronavirus? A coronavirus is a type of virus in a family of viruses, but this one just so happens to have mutated, and it's able to transmit from animal to human, and then human to human. And believe it or not, that actually does not happen as often as you might think. So it's believed to have started from a wet seafood market in Wuhan, China, with early reports of a deadly virus going around as early as November of 2019. Now, if you fast forward to the 31st of December, China reported to the World Health Organization, or the WHO, that they had some people who started to develop a dry cough and a fever, and dozens had actually now died from the pneumonia-like symptoms that the coronavirus causes. Now, out of the first 41 patients that they had diagnosed for coronavirus, 27 of them had been traced to the seafood market. It is rumored that it derived from exotic animals being traded in China, and they were housing exotic animals together, which is a perfect breeding ground for viruses. Now, China is known for the selling and trading of exotic animals. These animals are housed together, so blood, feces, urine, saliva, any bodily fluid that you can imagine is all just dripping down in cages and being exchanged, and it's mixed together, and viruses are all over the place. And there are no regulation or standards for how these animals are being housed there. So it's no guessing as to how this happened. So why is this happening in China, though? A lot of viruses that infect us actually originate in China because of their exotic wildlife market. Now, doing a little bit of research, in 1978, China allowed private farming. So small farmers who mostly worked out of their backyard began catching and selling wild animals. Now, the government saw that this could be a potential way of life for the entrepreneurs and encouraged them to make a living that way, because during the time, China's economy was collapsing and folks needed a way to make some money. So if you fast forward about 11 years later, in 1989, the Wildlife Protection Law was passed, which designated animals as resources of the state. This allowed people who made a living with exotic animals to be protected, and the market grew rapidly. Even the Chinese government actually encouraged the domestication and breeding of wildlife, and obviously an industry was born. And whenever an industry is born, a lot of times you'll get an illegal industry right beside it that's born as well. It's actually reported that exotic wildlife, animal, and trade industry in China is worth over 148 billion Chinese dollars. And ever since then, the industry never stopped growing. So let's fast forward a little bit, 14 more years to 2003. And you have the SARS outbreak in China that reached 29 countries and killed nearly 800 people. SARS is reported to have originated from a civet cat in a wet market in China, similar to how COVID-19 started. We are way past the SARS outbreak. COVID-19 is actually something that's entirely different. With this disease is technically less deadly than SARS and Ebola, but it is far more contagious. So with all of that being said, I just want to share a couple of my thoughts about it real quick. Now, do I think this is the end of the world? No. Is everyone going to die? No. Some folks are at higher risk. A lot of these factors, I'm sure you've seen in the news, whether it be pre-existing health conditions, I'm sure you heard that. Those with autoimmune diseases are more susceptible, and those with ultimately compromised immune systems are more at risk, because at the end of the day, this is a respiratory illness. It attacks the lungs. Now, testing. Testing is a huge issue in this country. We have no idea how many people are walking around with this virus who are asymptomatic. We have no idea how many people are thinking that this is just allergies or a bad cold, or they could be spreading the virus. It's impossible to fight a virus if you don't know who is infected. And that is what makes this coronavirus so complex. My issue with testing is not only is it not widely available, which is alarming, but we also have people who have mild to zero symptoms. They go get tested and the results come back positive. And then they are marked as a statistic in the coronavirus diagnostic category. So you must keep that in mind as well. But on the other hand, we also must remember that there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of undiagnosed people walking around with coronavirus. So we must keep that in mind when we are looking at these numbers. That one, some folks have little to no symptoms, but they're going in the category. Two, a lot of folks aren't even getting tested and have no idea they had it. And I personally believe that this has been going on in the United States for a little bit longer than reported, because I have a few friends who told me they were horribly ill in December and January. Their whole family was sick, and violently sick. Sicker than they had ever been. And this is before that this was even being really reported in the U.S. So you've got to think about that too. Now, the shortage of PPE equipment or personal protection equipment is causing doctors and nurses to become infected. And when that happens, they can't work, they can't treat patients. So the backlog of patients just continues to rise. And when the healthcare system is overwhelmed, we don't have ventilators, we don't have respirators, we don't have enough ICU beds. So what about the patient who just had a stroke? What about the person who has lung cancer down the hall? This puts our doctors and nurses in a position where they have to choose who to treat. And that is never a situation that you want to find yourself in. And all of that aside, the impact that this is having on the economy is going to be catastrophic. Experts are predicting that this is not only going to be a financial recession, but it's going to be a depression as well. I know people who were laid off weeks ago and had to go file for unemployment. I know people who have been trying to file for unemployment for over 2 weeks now and have been unable to get someone on the phone, or the website's crashing, or they just keep running into bumps in the road and they can't seem to get it done. And that is because thousands of Americans are being laid off each day, or whether they're furloughed or they're just unsure when they're going to be able to work again. And experts are also predicting that this is going to be the biggest economic collapse in history. The GDP is expected to fall 24%. Mind you, the biggest hit that the GDP picked was in 1958, and that was only 10%. So we're looking at a collapse almost 2.5 times worse than the biggest GDP collapse in the United States history. Experts are also predicting that this collapse could be bigger than the Great Depression. Then this is a result of Americans not working. And if Americans aren't working, they can't spend money, they can't pay their bills, and in some cases, they're going to be struggling to even feed themselves and their family. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Those are my thoughts on the coronavirus and what's going on in the world in 2020. It's been a heck of a year. This 3 months have been so far. But please wash your hands. Stay safe out there. Don't go visit your grandma. Just call her on FaceTime. Teach her how to use it. It's a perfect time. Use this time to tap back into that hobby or that one thing that you always wanted to do, because you got nothing but time. We don't know how long this is going to last, but thanks for tuning in, and there will be more to come, guys. Peace.